I showed up a little late to my parents' anniversary party. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew precisely how walking into that country club ballroom would feel like being forced into a family photo you were never part of. Still, my grandpa had insisted. "It's their big day," he said, putting on his old blazer like it was still 1982. He looked proud. Too proud. The place looked ridiculous. Crystal centerpieces, champagne towers, live piano, people wearing watches that cost more than my Jeep. I'd spent enough time in combat zones to know that luxury doesn't impress me. It usually means someone's compensating for something. My mom, Lydia, spotted me from across the room and gave the kind of wave that's half welcome, half warning, behave. My dad, Douglas, just nodded like I was an HR rep attending a company event. My younger brother, Trent, was surrounded by finance bros and two girls who looked like they were paid to pretend to laugh. Standard. But I wasn't there for them. I was the only person who never asked me to pretend to be someone I'm not. My grandpa, Walter Sloan, sat quietly near the back table, next to the cake that probably cost more than he made in a month during his best years. I walked over, and he smiled when he saw me, like the world finally made sense. He looked small in that chair, but not weak, just older. That kind of strong that doesn't need attention. Then I saw the nameplate. Gold-edged, fancy cursive, trying real hard to look classy. It read, Walter Sloan, low-educated burden. At first, I thought maybe it was some kind of inside joke I wasn't in on. Then I saw my mom smirk across the room, sipping wine with her colleagues from the university. One of them pointed toward our table and laughed out loud. I looked back at Grandpa. He stared at the plate briefly, then turned it face down like it was nothing. Like he was used to being humiliated in polite ways. That did something to me. The server came by and tried to pour him a drink, but he waved it off. "Water's fine," he said, real quiet. The table was silent, but the rest of the room buzzed like nothing had happened. That's how this family works. You get insulted with a smile, then told you're overreacting if you don't laugh along. Someone at the following table, probably one of Trent's networking friends, leaned over and said, "No shame in being simple. At least he raised a Marine, right?" Then he chuckled like he'd just complimented us. I stared at him long enough for him to shift in his seat and suddenly remember his drink. Grandpa patted my hand. "Don't make a scene," he said. He still thought there was a way to handle this quietly. That's when I stood up. I didn't say a word. Didn't knock over the table, scream or cry. I just took his coat off the back of the chair, helped him up, and said, loud enough for the front table to hear, "Let's go, Grandpa." The pianist stopped playing for a second. The clink of forks and glasses froze. People looked up like I'd farted during a funeral. And still, no one said anything. Not my mom, not my dad, not Trent. We walked out of that ballroom, down the marble steps, past the valet guy who tried to offer us a cart. I waved him off. Grandpa and I walked to my truck, and there were no words between us. He looked straight ahead the whole time. I drove without asking where we were going, because it didn't matter. We were done being polite. Have you ever seen someone take a hit and smile through it because it's all they've ever known? That was my grandpa. A man who worked his whole life with his hands fixing broken machines, scraping together tuition for kids who'd later mock the grease under his nails. And that night, someone put his worth on paper and called it truth, but they forgot who his granddaughter was. Tell me in the comments if you've ever watched someone you love get disrespected like that, especially by their own family. I want to hear it. And don't forget to hit subscribe if you're here for real stories, not polished nonsense. Because back at that table, when I saw that nameplate, I didn't just walk out. I started something. The sound of my boots on the driveway was the only thing I could hear after we left the club. That, and Grandpa's breathing. Slow, steady. Not angry, just tired in a way that makes you wonder how long he's been swallowing this kind of crap without saying a word. I didn't ask him if he was okay. That would have felt not very kind. He didn't ask me either. We just sat in my truck, windows down, not saying anything for 15 minutes. The air smelled like boxwood hedges and fake celebration. I dropped him off at his house, a little one-story brick place he's lived in for over 40 years. He told me to come in. I nodded, parked, and followed him in. The screen door creaked like it always has. Nothing had changed in that house. Same yellow wallpaper, same recliner with a missing button, same framed photo of me in my marine dress blues, right above the old fireplace. He made 2 mugs of instant coffee. No words, just hot water, powdered creamer, and silence. We drank like a ritual, something passed down between 2 people who'd seen enough to know that comfort doesn't always need conversation. Then he looked at me and said, "I knew they didn't want me there." I didn't answer right away. Because what do you even say to that? It's not true? It was printed on a damn sign in gold ink. He kept going, soft and even. I was proud of them once, thought I'd raised a decent daughter, thought maybe I'd helped make a man out of Douglas. But now, I think they're more worried about how I look on paper than what I've done in life. I leaned back. The couch squeaked. They didn't just insult you, Grandpa. They made it formal, printed, displayed, framed in front of 200 people. He smiled like it didn't bother him, but his eyes looked older than they did 2 hours ago. "I don't care what they think of me," he said. "I care what you think of me." That hit harder than I expected. Because deep down, I knew I'd built most of who I am based on his example. The discipline, the work ethic, and the show up, shut up, and do it right mentality didn't come from my parents' lecture hall degrees. That came from a man who fixed busted boilers and broken dishwashers for 40 years without calling in sick. He didn't cry. He didn't get mad. He said, "Don't waste your energy trying to fix this." But that's where he was wrong. I wasn't trying to fix it. I was already halfway done breaking it. Nobody at that party knew, not my mom, Douglas, or Golden Boy Trent, that I hadn't just been working freelance jobs since I got out of the military. I'd been building something, quietly, patiently, just like Grandpa taught me. Over the last 2 years, I'd done something my parents never imagined. I got smart. Not the classroom kind of smart, the kind of smart that watches, plans, and waits. I knew they'd eventually slip up. They'd forget how the Sloan Heritage Foundation started, how Grandpa used his retirement and his late wife's savings to fund scholarships for kids from working-class families. It was honest before Lydia turned it into a PR stunt and Douglas used it for tax shielding. Simple, helpful, and then they polluted it with their obsession with appearances. I'd been watching the money move, the grants that never made it to students, the board members who were mysteriously replaced. The way Trent's consulting firm somehow received a contract worth 6 figures to rebrand the mission. So no, I wasn't shocked by that nameplate. I wasn't surprised they'd try to humiliate the only decent man in the room. But I was done pretending I couldn't do something about it. I rinsed out the coffee mugs, placed them in the sink, and hugged Grandpa on the way out. He didn't say anything. He patted my shoulder twice and looked me in the eye like he knew I wouldn't let this slide. As I stepped outside, the porch light buzzed overhead. I could hear crickets in the yard and tires rolling past in the distance. It was a quiet kind of anger that doesn't burn out. I got in my truck and turned the engine on, but I didn't drive straight home. I had a storage unit across town. Inside it was a file box I hadn't opened in months. It was labeled Foundation, Leverage, Legal. I wasn't bringing coffee the next time I showed up at a Sloan family event. I pulled into my apartment lot just past midnight, left the engine running, and sat there for a minute with the overhead light off. The file box was in the passenger seat, right where I left it 2 months ago, unopened. I didn't touch it yet. Instead, I leaned back and let myself remember. Not the war, not the sand, the burn pits, or the night patrols. This wasn't that kind of memory. This was the kind that creeps in when you're dead, sober, and pissed off but somehow still grounded. The kind where you're not thinking about enemies, you're thinking about family. My mom used to say I was emotionally uncooperative. She was telling people I was cold without sounding like a bad mother. She wanted a daughter who wore dresses, said thank you, and smiled through Sunday brunch. I preferred field gear, grenades, and people who didn't lie to your face over cheese platters. Growing up in the Sloan house felt like attending someone else's version of life. Dinner was formal. Conversations were filtered. Achievements were measured by how presentable they looked in a college application. Trent thrived in it. I didn't. The only person who didn't try to fix me was Grandpa. He'd pick me up in his rusted-out Dodge after school and take me to job sites. He'd let me hold the flashlight while he fixed sump pumps, boilers, and busted dryers. No lectures. Just hold this, don't drop that, and if it leaks again, we do it better. One day, I asked him why he was still working at his age. He said, "Because when I stop working, people stop thinking I matter." He didn't say it with sadness. He said it was just how the world works and accepted it. When I enlisted in the Marines at 19, my mom called it a reaction to low self-esteem. My dad said, "You'll come back different. Just don't come back damaged." Trent didn't say anything. He just shrugged, like I was giving up on something invisible. But Grandpa? He showed up to my swearing in. He wore a suit that didn't fit and held a camcorder from the early 2000s. Afterwards, he gave me a box of old Army field manuals from a flea market. Said, "They're outdated, but the grit in 'em still applies." He was the only one who wrote letters when I was deployed. Real letters, not forwarded emails. He'd talk about his workshop, the neighbor's dog, and a tomato plant that kept dying no matter what. It didn't matter what he wrote, it mattered that he wrote. After I returned, they all threw me a welcome home dinner. My mom invited colleagues. My dad gave a short speech about resilience. Trent had a slideshow. Grandpa hugged me tight and said, "You still have all your fingers? Good. Let's eat." That was him. No show, no pretense, just a steady presence. When I started looking into the foundation, I didn't tell anyone, not even him. He still believed the best in people, even when they stopped deserving it. I didn't want to break that part of him. But what happened at that party, that broke something in me. Not just because they embarrassed him, but because I knew he would have taken it and smiled through it, just to keep the peace. And I couldn't keep letting him do that. I took the file box upstairs. No ceremony, no dramatic music, just me, fluorescent kitchen light, and 2 years of printed documents. Tax filings, board member changes, internal memos. I'd been collecting them quietly through public records, and an invaluable friend named Natalie used to do data analysis for Army Intel, and now runs her own IT security firm out of Boise. She once said, "Every family has a skeleton. Yours just filed theirs under charitable giving." There were copies of checks signed by my mom to speaking engagements where she was paid to represent the foundation, but she never disclosed that she was related to the founder. Records show that Trent billed the foundation $87,000 for strategic communications. There was even a scanned contract awarding a renovation job to Douglas's golf buddy, a job never completed. I wasn't looking for dirt. I was documenting it. Quietly, deliberately. Because I knew one day, they'd cross a line. And when they did, I didn't want justice to come from shouting. I wanted it to come with signatures, paper trails, and proof no one could laugh off. I was raised by a man who believed in showing up and doing the job right, especially if no one clapped. That night, I stayed up until dawn, sorting documents into piles. I wasn't making a plan. The plan had already been in motion. I was just updating it. And somewhere around 4 a.m., I remembered that nameplate. That ridiculous, expensive, gold-rimmed insult. I laughed. Just once. Then I got to work. The first time I got curious about the foundation wasn't because of anything shady. It was because I tried to donate to it. 2 years ago, after wrapping up a short-term contract training a private security team overseas, I came back stateside with more cash than I knew what to do with. I didn't trust the stock market, and I sure as hell wasn't handing it to a financial advisor named Brad. So I thought, maybe I'll quietly give back to the place that shaped me, or at least to the man who did. I Googled Sloan Heritage Foundation and ended up on a glossy website with stock images of diverse smiling students and buzzwords like innovation and future leaders. Grandpa's name was in one line, in small font, under Founder Emeritus. Nothing about how he mortgaged his house to fund that thing. Nothing about the hundreds of hours he spent chasing down paperwork and donations before Lydia and Douglas took over and rebranded it. There wasn't even a donation button that worked. It redirected to a "Contact Us" form. Red flag number 1. I emailed. No response. I emailed again from a fake name. Still nothing. I called the listed number. Some PR assistant picked up and told me they weren't accepting direct donations from unverified parties. Red flag number 2. That's when I started digging. At first, just out of annoyance. Then it became something else. Something sharper. I found the original founding documents through the state nonprofit registry. It listed Walter Sloan as the primary founder and sole voting member. But a year later, an amendment appeared, adding Lydia and Douglas as co-directors. Then another one, removing Walter entirely, due to age and health considerations. No doctor's note, no legal trigger, just their word. I printed every page, highlighted names, dates, and signatures. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was trained to read documents under pressure, in languages I didn't speak, while people tried to kill me. This was slower, cleaner, but the stakes still felt personal. Next came the board. Most nonprofits of that size have a 5 to 7 person board. Sloan Heritage had 12 people, all tied to my parents. University colleagues, Douglas's former law partner, Trent's fraternity brother, who now ran a consulting firm. I cross-checked every name. Half had received speaking honoraria or project stipends from the foundation in the past 3 years. And then I found the clause. Buried in a scanned PDF of the original founding charter, in language that looked like it hadn't been touched since 1989, was a single paragraph under contingency leadership succession. It stated, "In the event that the founding director becomes unable to manage the foundation due to age, health, or legal incapacity, voting authority may be transferred to a direct blood descendant who demonstrates alignment with the foundation's original purpose, provided said descendant is not currently involved in personal financial gain from foundation operations." In plain English, if Grandpa couldn't run it, and the people running it now were taking money out of it, which they were, then I could challenge them. I just had to prove 2 things. 1, that they were profiting. 2, that I wasn't. The second part was easy. I'd never touched a dime from the foundation. I hadn't been invited to events since leaving for the Marines. The first part took longer. That's where Marcus came in. I met Marcus Delgado in Helmand Province. He was a Navy corpsman who'd patched up more bullet holes than most trauma surgeons, then switched to law school the second he got home. Now he specialized in nonprofit oversight cases and owed me a favor. I sent him everything. No context, just the docs. An hour later he called me. "You sitting on a live grenade?" I said, "Not yet, but I think I know where to throw it." He walked me through IRS Form 990S, the public financial disclosures law required for nonprofits. It turns out that Sloan Heritage failed to file one in 2019. Strike one. In 2020, they listed Lydia as receiving a $62,000 consulting fee for educational programming, but there was no record of any program. Strike two. In 2021, Trent's media firm was paid $87,000 for branding and outreach. I checked their website. It had 4 pages. One of them was blank. I was no longer annoyed. I was focused. For every fake invoice, for every vague service fee, for every cousin or tennis buddy turned consultant, I built a file. Natalie helped me encrypt everything. Marcus started drafting a formal petition for board review based on the original charter and financial misconduct. But I didn't want a lawsuit. I didn't want headlines. I wanted leverage. I wanted to walk into a room full of people who thought they'd won, who thought no one would ever come for them, and show them that the daughter they ignored, the Marine they dismissed, the granddaughter they disrespected, was the one holding the detonator. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about restoring what they stole. From Grandpa, from the students who never got those scholarships, from a legacy they hijacked, polished, and called their own. So I kept digging, because the deeper I went, the more they gave me. I used to think basic training would be the most challenging part of becoming a Marine. It turns out that surviving my own family required a lot more discipline. Joining the military wasn't some dramatic escape. It wasn't a rebellion. It was structured. It was clarity. It was finally being where you earned based on performance, not polish. Nobody cared where you went to school or whether you used the right fork at dinner. They cared whether you showed up on time and didn't screw over the people next to you. My first unit was in Okinawa. Humid, crowded, efficient. I liked it. I liked knowing what I was responsible for every single day. I liked sweating for a purpose. I liked that people told you the truth, even if it was brutal. I didn't miss my family. I missed Grandpa. He'd send me short letters, all caps, because he didn't believe in lowercase. Proud of you. Don't let idiots get in your head. Love, Washington LT. Sometimes he'd tape a gas station lottery ticket to the card with a note, "If you win, don't tell your mother." My unit rotated out, and I ended up in Fallujah for 6 months. Things happen there that I don't narrate, not because I can't, but because some things don't belong in words. You carry them in posture, not paragraphs. When I got back, I had a small service-related disability claim, mostly hearing loss and light PTSD, the kind you manage if you don't let it rot. I went into private security contracting for a while, then operations consulting. It was good money, but not glamorous. I didn't want a spotlight, I wanted leverage. That's where I met Natalie. She used to run comms support for Air Force intelligence. Brilliant, dry-humored, zero tolerance for bullshit. We ended up on the same private contract in South Africa, tasked with securing a facility everyone kept pretending wasn't a weapons lab. She was always 2 steps ahead of everyone. After the mission, we kept in touch. She moved back to Boise and started a cybersecurity business. I invested, quietly. I told her once, over coffee, "My family thinks I'm unemployed." She laughed, poured more sugar into her espresso, and said, "Perfect. That means they'll never see you coming." Then there was Marcus. He'd patched me up twice in Helmand, once when I got caught in a gate malfunction, once after a nasty ambush that took out our radio man. After service, he disappeared into law school like he owed someone a favor. When I learned he specialized in nonprofit and tax code litigation, I didn't even pretend I wasn't calling in a debt. I sent both Natalie and Marcus copies of my files early on. I told them I didn't want revenge. I wanted exposure. I wanted structure. I wanted it clean. They didn't ask questions. They just got to work. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances, which wasn't hard, because no one in my family asked. I'd get the occasional group text from my mom about Sloan Foundation newsletters, mostly press photos and vague articles quoting her about modern philanthropy. Not once did they ask me what I was doing with my life, and I liked it that way. Every time I got another file, another invoice, or another red flag, I didn't have to explain why I cared. I just filed it, labeled it, secured it, and moved on. The military taught me that the best revenge isn't flashy, it's precise. It's showing up at a gunfight with air support, and no one knows you called in. I started buying small stakes in the foundation through third-party holdings, nothing that would tip anyone off. Natalie helped set it up. Whenever Douglas or Lydia diluted a voting share to pay for some capital expansion, I picked it up at a discount. They never even noticed. By the end of year 1, I held 17%. By year 2, I held 32%. It is not enough to control the foundation outright, but enough to block any significant decisions and call for a vote. The real tipping point came from Trent. Of course it did. He was sloppy, thought he was a genius, started pushing this digital rebranding initiative, charged the foundation $280,000 for a campaign that consisted of 4 TikToks and an outdated Wix site. One of the invoices included $8,000 for executive wardrobe coordination. Marcus flagged it immediately. This alone could bury them, he texted, especially if it was billed as program expense, not admin overhead. I checked. It was. Now I had them on both fronts, ethically and legally. But I wasn't interested in burning the whole place down. Not yet. I wanted to stand before them, say nothing, and watch their faces when they realized who'd been sitting in the shadows with receipts. The Marines taught me how to dismantle things quickly. But Grandpa taught me patience. I was going to need both. The only thing more fragile than old money is the myth it builds around itself. I learned that the moment I stepped into one of those foundation galas, I hadn't planned to go, but Trent made the mistake of publicly announcing a celebration of growth at a rooftop event in New Haven open bar, donor invites, and press access encouraged. The flyer even had a poorly cropped photo of Lydia standing beside a kid in a graduation robe. The kid wasn't even from the program. I checked. He was a model from a stock photo site. I showed up wearing a navy jumpsuit and boots. Not dress boots, real ones. I wasn't on the list but didn't need to be. I walked in during cocktail hour, and nobody stopped me. The thing about these events is that everyone assumes if you walk like you belong, you must. I didn't talk to anyone, just watched. Lydia was surrounded by junior faculty and some guy from the Chamber of Commerce. Douglas was already 2 martinis deep, laughing at something a man in a Vineyard Vines vest said. Trent stood near the DJ booth like he invented rooftop sound systems. The theme was Generations of Impact. The irony was so thick you could spread it on a cracker. On one of the tables, Little pamphlets glossy, full color, badly proofread, claiming Sloan Heritage had sponsored 123 low-income scholars across 11 states. I cross-checked the names. Only 38 had received funding. The rest? Either duplicates, former applicants, or complete fabrications. But what stuck with me wasn't the lies, it was the way everyone there ate them up. A woman in pearls told her friend, "It's so beautiful how Lydia's father built this legacy and now she's carrying it forward." Built it? Walter Sloan once pawned his wedding ring to keep the foundation's first year afloat. He didn't build a legacy. He bled one into existence. And now they used his name like a prop. A soft story to charm donors and justify their expense reports. I left early, but not before slipping a copy of the original founding charter into the back of the event binder marked media packet. Just enough to confuse, not enough to make noise. I wanted them nervous, not alarmed. Back home, I went back to the numbers. The foundation issued a digital newsletter to its board and select donors every quarter. Marcus helped me subpoena copies using a shell LLC. I created nothing illegal, just legally inconvenient. Each issue followed a pattern. Inflated impact numbers, empty buzzwords, new partnerships with firms I'd never heard of. So, I looked into those firms. One of them, Arc Bridge Solutions, claimed to provide scholarship optimization software. The company address was a P.O. box. The founder? Lydia's former student. The board member who signed the contract? Douglas. Another firm, Clearevo Outreach, charged $42,000 for a rural access campaign that only existed as 3 Instagram posts and 1 bus bench ad in Albany. I confirmed the ad had been placed for a week. The price? $280. When I tracked the money, it constantly looped back to the same orbit: family, friends, and flattery. Meanwhile, hundreds of scholarship applications were flagged as pending review or declined due to limited funds. Some were from single-parent families, military families, first-generation students, people like me. The hypocrisy wasn't even subtle. I printed a few of the most egregious examples. A kid from Scranton, who wrote about working night shifts to support his mom, had been denied twice, while the board approved a $6,500 reimbursement for Lydia's strategic retreat in Aspen. I emailed the files under the subject line, "This is the hill." Grandpa once told me, "There's always a hill worth standing on. But if you pick it, don't back down halfway." So I didn't. Natalie ran a forensic audit using public records and donor disclosures on 3 years of transactions. Her report returned 43 flagged items, 12 of which could be civil violations. 4 lean criminals, if paired with the right angle. Marcus called me the next morning. "Do you want to go nuclear or surgical?" I said, "I want to go legal." He said, "Then let's make sure every word we use is admissible." That week, I quietly filed a request to access board meeting minutes under Connecticut nonprofit transparency laws. Marcus co-signed. I didn't even list my name, just the LLC. It got approved in 36 hours. What we received was gold. Meeting notes revealed 2 internal discussions about perception risk if Walter Sloan were to make public statements criticizing current board policy. Lydia had told the board, "Dad's memory isn't what it used to be. We love him, but he's not in a place to understand the new vision." That's when I stopped reading for a second. Not only was that a lie, but it was also calculated and cowardly. They didn't just erase him from leadership. They discredited him in advance, in case he ever told the truth. That was when I realized this wasn't a family legacy gone off course. This was a deliberate hijacking. And they didn't even flinch while doing it. My hands were still a little shaky when I printed the meeting minutes. Not from fear, from clarity. The kind of stillness you get right before a sniper takes the shot. Focused, cold, ready. That's when I pulled out the charter again. The original one. Not the edited copies they'd buried under updates and press kits. The one Grandpa drafted with a volunteer paralegal in 1992, typed on a typewriter with uneven ribbon. I'd read it a dozen times before. But this time, I read it line by line. Slowly, like I was looking for a switch hidden in plain sight. And there it was. Article 4. Section 8. Paragraph B. In the event of executive misconduct or deviation from mission alignment, a direct descendant of the founding member provided, said, individual holds no current financial interest or benefit from, Foundation operations may petition for full administrative review and assume interim authority pending board evaluation, if approved by no less than 1/3 of silent voting shares. And I-4. In English, if the current leadership screwed up, and someone in the bloodline wasn't on the payroll and had even partial backing from silent partners, that person could trigger a board review and potentially assume temporary control. It was a long shot, but legally, it was airtight. The kicker was silent voting shares. Most nonprofit boards don't even bother with them anymore. But Grandpa was old school. He believed in having backup voices, people with skin in the game, but not the spotlight. Over the years, he'd gifted 10 shares to friends, community members, and in one case, his barber. And I had names. I started calling. One by one. Carefully. First was Mr. Levinson, a retired middle school teacher from Brooklyn who was 81 years old. He remembered Grandpa fondly, asked if Walter was still fixing lawnmowers for fun. I said yes. He said, "You've got my vote." How? Next was Regina Moore. She used to run the after-school program that partnered with the foundation back in the day. She'd been pushed out during leadership restructuring. She didn't hesitate. "That place hasn't been about kids in years," she said. The third was Pastor Daniels from Hartford. He told me, "The day Walter stopped showing up at board meetings was the day I stopped believing in them." By the end of the week, I had 4 verbal consents. I needed one more. Number 5 was Charles Hahn, former small business owner, now semi-retired, living in Vermont. He was skeptical, said he didn't want to be involved in family drama. Fair. I didn't pressure him. I just emailed him the fake scholarship data, the invoices, and a photo of the nameplate from the anniversary party. He called me 20 minutes later. "Where do I sign?" That was it. I had the 1/3 threshold. 5 out of 12 silent shares vote. Enough to trigger the clause. Marcus drafted the petition. Natalie scrubbed it clean of metadata and set up a secure drop to deliver it. I signed it under my full legal name. Avery Sloan. No LLC. No alias. Just me. I'd been invisible to them for years. Time to fix that. We time-stamped the petition for delivery the following Tuesday, the same day Trent had planned a strategic realignment breakfast, with a few state-level donors.